What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the debut episode of For the Record here from Season Gaming. I am your host, Ainsley Bowden, and I am joined by my partner in crime, resident tech expert over at SG, Karl Dwyer. Afternoon, mate. How you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. So this is our debut episode of For the Record. This is going to be a show where we basically take all of the latest gaming tech, insights into tech, news around tech, and break it down for you, the gamer. We break through all the jargon, break through all the specs, and we explain to you what it means to you, the games you play, the consoles you love, the platforms you love. We're going to break all that down for you in an easy, hopefully, to understand way. So today, we're going to be tackling the storage wars, as we like to call it. So the move to SSDs, the variations in SSDs between PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and some of the things behind the scenes that go into things like I/O data, decompression, things of that nature. So why don't we start, Karl, with hard drives themselves being the kind of primary source or the initiating source of this conversation, the difference between your old HD and the SSDs that are currently used in the series consoles, PS5, and modern PCs.
Cool. So where do I start? You want to start old school hard drives?
Go for it.
I was there 3,000 years ago. Well, yeah, so old school hard drives. So if you're familiar with a record player has a stylus, and the stylus moves across a record for whereabouts it is within a song. A hard drive is very much the same. It has moving parts. It's a mechanical device. It has a head that reads and writes data to the hard drive.
Yep.
And that has to move, right? That has to move from one place to another to go. And they call it seeks. So it'll go and seek a piece of data. And you have to factor in, as a developer, the time it takes for that head to move from point A to point B. So I'll just stop there in a minute for the hard drive thing, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Solid state, the answer's in the name, really, of what it is. It's a solid state. It's got no moving parts. If you want to go and retrieve a bit of data, you just find the location where it is and just read it off, like it would be on imagine if you got a sheet of paper, you put lines across it, squares across that, and you named them 1 to 100, and you knew a bit of data was in number 75, you just go and ask something to retrieve something from the 75, and away you go. In a very, very simplistic fashion, that's how it works.
Right.
There's no moving parts. You don't have to factor in anything traveling from point A to point B. You just go and pick that bit of data out. So that's the difference fundamentally between the two.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Adding one more layer to that, on old hard drives, because they're slow and they have to move from point A to point B, in a game, if you had a dustbin texture in an open world, because you have to factor in streaming and the asset streaming into the world, you might have that dustbin texture dotted all over the hard drive, all over that game package, because you have to factor in the head is going to move to pick it up. Solid state, you don't get that.
Exactly. So foundationally speaking, this is kind of the simplest theme that we're talking about today. And I would say that probably most people watching have a cursory level of understanding of that. But that probably ties back to more relatable to some of the cross-gen development troubles we've seen, where you may load into a game. Your last example there, for instance, would be where you load into a new area, you turn a corner, and you're looking at a blank wall because the texture hasn't loaded yet. Really, the old hard drive just hasn't caught up and found that piece of data yet.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And a lot of developers, if you listen to a lot of the dev forums, they've been crying out for this for the best part of 5-7 years.
Yeah.
It's not a new thing. And really early into the last generation, they hit the ceiling on how fast they could stream from a game world.
Right.
So if you think about game design, in Horizon Zero Dawn, they actually thought about having to be able to fly on a mechanical pterodactyl or whatever.
Right.
They had to rule that out early on in game development because you couldn't stream the data in quick enough to travel that way.
So that kicks us off with the HD versus SSD, and now the improvements in new gen consoles, and obviously all modern gaming PCs have been on SSDs for a while. Fundamentally, there's obviously differences in SSD speeds. So as we talk about data streaming, which we're alluding to now, take us to the next kind of factor in that equation as we think about, again, modern gaming PCs and the new gen consoles.
So do we want to go the Sony way and say we want to focus on next gen?
Go for it.
And then just do cross gen.
Yeah, go. Yep.
When you start, so next gen is going to be one of the biggest things that is going to make next gen different from last gen is the SSD. I mean, graphics get better. You're going to have better shadows, better lighting. You're going to have higher res textures. You can have ray tracing to some degree in some of these titles, or global illumination. But the SSD allows you to put much more in the world. It allows for a better game mechanics, seamless transitions between areas, no more creeping through a crevice, no more elevator rides or subway rides. So you're going to see a lot less of them type of transitions and more of that seamless open world. But what it's going to do for us in the longer game is that game worlds are going to become much more dense. You're going to have many more assets on screen. Game files over time for the same type of size game will actually start to shrink because you not have to factor in last gen game packages where they've had to duplicate assets all over the place. That's quite evident on Xbox at the moment with the likes of Smart Delivery. Some of the game files are quite big because they have to factor in, the legacy Xbox is the Xbox One and so forth. And there are things within Smart Delivery where you can be really specific about the game package, but not everybody does that, it seems. But as I say, when Microsoft start focusing on next gen only in PC, and they assume all PCs have got hard SSDs, you'll see them game packages start to shrink to roughly the same size-ish as what you find on PlayStation 5 packages these days.
Right.
And that's part of the knock-on effect of this. But in game worlds, what you're going to start to see is a lot more asset streaming. So you're going to see the GPUs getting really close to using SSDs as a secondary data pool and pulling data really quickly off that. So you can imagine game worlds can be much more vibrant. You can have much more foliage. Textures can be much more higher. You could just go for the extra realism. Right. But there are some things that underpin that. So on Microsoft side of things, you've got a really great focus, incredible focus on the likes of your APIs. So direct storage, which is going to be great when everyone gets behind that. That's going to really make a difference for the Xbox console. It really is, and PC, because part of the likes of direct storage, you've got sampler feedback as well. Sampler feedback streaming, that's part of that mix. They called it the velocity architecture.
Right.
It's all marketing, but that is Microsoft approach, and we'll get into that in a moment.
Sony, to be clear, just to jump in there, because you mentioned a few words that we talk about, but the audience may not. When you talk about APIs, you're talking about basically a shared programming language that's shared across Xbox and PC that developers can take advantage of here in the essence of sampler feedback streaming, where, as you just said, they're able to pass that data very quickly between the GPU and the storage.
Exactly that.
Okay, trying to break it down. So, all right. And then, now moving to the PS5, which is a different design, more bespoke, as we've said before.
Yeah. So Microsoft have gone with the path of least resistance, really, where they've focused on a software point of view, driven through APIs and really closely linked to the likes of DirectX.
Yes.
But PlayStation have just basically gone wild with I/O. I think that's probably the most technical part of the PlayStation is its I/O, its I/O engine, and that's really consists of a few different things. Now, just moving back to Xbox for a moment, you've got one thing that really differentiates it when it comes to PC in the Xbox. PC at the moment doesn't have dedicated decompression blocks anywhere.
Okay.
On that hardware, you either rely on the CPU or you rely on the GPU to unpack data. So data's delivered to places on that on the I/O in a small package, and then the CPU unpacks them to then move it to the GPU, which then can display it on screen.
Right.
Direct storage can sort of go one further than that and not solely rely on the CPU to do it, but it can ask the GPU to unpack some of that data. And because it's at the GPU level, you're not having to move that data much more around to get it onto the screen as well. So really clever thinking from Microsoft on that. So the PC will rely on the CPU and the GPU to do that unpacking as part of direct storage. But the Xbox has got a one-up because it's got dedicated hardware built into it to do that decompression.
Gotcha.
And them decompression blocks are really close to the GPU as well. So you're not moving data around. You just get it straight on the screen through the GPU.
Got it.
Good stuff. Yep. Moving over to the PlayStation, everything's in hardware. It's not an API-driven approach.
Right.
It's literally built into hardware, mainly on the PlayStation 5. And what you've got there is a stupidly fast I/O. So you've got 2.4 gigabytes per second on the Xbox, both of them, and then you've got 5.5 or thereabouts raw read. This is across the PlayStation 5, and we'll get into what it means when you use compressed data as well. But that is not, when you look at the numbers. Okay, the PlayStation's bigger, but that's not the whole picture.
Sure.
You've also got on the PlayStation a few other bits which make it a bit more unique in its approach to I/O. And I think it was Tim Sweeney. Did Tim Sweeney say it was God tier I/O at one point?
Someone did. I don't remember if it was Tim, but someone did. Yes.
It's pretty close to it because PCIe 5 is only getting close to some of the aspects of the architecture around I/O in the PlayStation 5. And what sets it apart is the fact that you've got a way of prioritizing data inbuilt to the PlayStation 5. So you've got 6 levels of priority. And what that means is you can label certain data types and give it a priority on how fast it gets presented to the I/O to get to the GPU.
Okay.
So you can do that. So for instance, you could say, right, these type of textures, I want them to load really quick because there's something that's really near field to the camera and a game.
Right.
Yep, you can do that. Yep. That's in hardware. I don't have to use an API to do that. It's in hardware.
Okay.
Moving over to the likes of just how fast the data can move about, you've got 12 lanes of data channels to be able to move data in and out of the GPU, move it through the CPU if it needs to, move it through to the GPU. And then you've got some dedicated controls on there. You've got a coherency engine, which allows you to move data between various areas at once. And then you've got a DMA controller, so direct memory access controller in there. And then you've got I/O controllers as well. So I think it was described in one of the talks that these extra sort of parts of the bespoke I/O are equivalent to 2 Zen 2 cores of power,
right?
CPU crunching.
Basically, the ability to process through that data, like on the PC side, either the CPU or the GPU, as you were explaining, they would have to tie up those cores to do this processing, which the PS5 is using bespoke architecture to do outside of the CPU and GPU. Is that accurate?
Exactly that. So because the GPU is not as big,
right,
as for instance the Xbox, they're trying to lighten the load on the GPU by doing a lot of it offhand in the I/O by itself, which frees up the GPU cycles to do more things like geometry and get things on screen and whatnot.
Sure.
But the I/O on the PlayStation is really close to the GPU. So if you've listened to a lot of the developer sort of podcasts and so on, they go on about something like cache scrubbers.
Yes.
So the ability for the GPU to extract pieces of data or cache that's in there really quickly to put new data in so it's not stale. That new data is coming from the I/O, from the into the memory, and then into the GPU. So they can be really quick about how they shift data in and out. That's, as I say, the difference is that's all done in hardware. Whereas if you move over to the Xbox, it's based around direct storage, sampler feedback, which basically, if you're going to really be direct about and clear about what direct sampler feedback is, you don't have to render the same texture over and over again if it's already on the screen. It can just be what's changed can be rendered.
Okay.
Yep. You don't have to render the same all the textures at once. So that means not having to move loads of data in and out at once. You can leave some data in there because that black chair is the texture on that black chair is not going to change.
Right.
Your position from the camera, so it doesn't have to replace that. It just replaces things that the player, the camera would see. So you can be really efficient about what textures you bring in and out. That's how that works. Whereas in the PlayStation, it's in hardware. You label assets, you label textures, you label sounds, whatever you want. Doesn't have to be texture. And you can pinpoint it, give it a priority in how fast it gets there.
Yep.
But also be really clear about, I'll take that out as well. So you can move data really quickly around that architecture.
It's really, as we talk through this stuff, it really starts to make you think about when developers give insight to how complicated game development is, especially when you talk about cross-platform game development.
Oh, God, yeah.
You can start to envision, as you're talking through these details of just dealing with textures and data, the coding that goes on behind the scenes for these games we play, and the differences when they say, okay, we're releasing this on Switch, PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and PC. And just the amount of effort and work that goes into the differences between all those platforms. It's incredible.
Forget Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. These guys are the real rock stars nowadays.
It is incredible. Incredible. So you've kind of talked on, it's really interesting because I know you've really taken an interest with the PS5 due to its kind of really interesting and unique design and their lack of just coming out and saying, here's everything we did. It's kind of, you have to dig to find all the data. And even still, I believe people are like yourself are trying to dig and find more details on specific things of the architecture.
Yeah, you can infer what's going on with the PlayStation. I mean, Microsoft have been super open about everything they've done with that, and it's not to say I've got an interest just in the PlayStation 5. I haven't. I'm interested in it because we don't know that much.
Right. Yeah. It's curious, right? Or curiosity.
Yeah. Is it a full RDNA 2? Who knows? What's a geometry? What the hell's the geometry engine? What makes it up? There's all these things that Sony have been really cagey about, and it's probably because they wouldn't win a numbers game.
Yes.
It's clearly wouldn't, and that's it's down to marketing. Whereas Microsoft, super engaging with the community. You knew everything about that machine before it came out. Really great architecture, really great design. The PlayStation's a bit of an enigma, so you can infer what Sony are doing with the PlayStation. The I/O, if you look at it, raw numbers is a crazy pit of kit. Yeah, It's not all about the raw read, or when you add compression, I can do 22 gigabytes a second on this thing. That's it's not all about the numbers. It's the ability to prioritize data. You've got 12 channels to move data around, and you've got dedicated hardware just for unpacking data and getting it as close to the GPU as possible. That is it's a crazy way of working, and I just want to see a year, 2 years from now, just what the difference is.
That's what I was going to say next. Is you and I talk often about, we're still in the stage right now of cross development, and we've got two companies. If you're looking at the consoles, obviously PC is its own beast, but if you're looking at the consoles, you've got two companies who took the approach aimed at the same end result, which is what I think is most interesting, right? The end result that they're targeting for is always going to be very similar because we know what we want out of our games and the possibilities there. But they, in their approach to it, they kind of went like this. And you've got two different ways of reaching that same goal. It's almost like they're coming like this. And I just find it very interesting that when we get to the place, as you said, year, 2 years from now, and we're seeing these fully dedicated time under the time in development on the new hardware only, we should really start to see that gap broaden between what we've seen previously. Right?
Yeah, definitely. definitely. And you know, the machines are really close in spec for that end result.
Yes.
The Xbox has got that. I'd say it's probably got a little bit more legs in it because of certain things that Microsoft waited to put in last minute.
Right.
But like everything, are they ever going to get to use it? We don't know. Outside of first party or even in first party, because, you know, some of these things are, what's the point? Dev times, you know, this, that, and the other. Whereas, you know, the likes of Sony, we're not going to see the IO leveraged outside of first party, right? There's going to be a middle ground with all this stuff between multi-plat. So
always is. Always is.
Yeah.
So, good conversation. Thank you for the breakdown of these details. Anything else you want to add on this topic specifically?
Anything else? No.
I mean, there's kind of things there's overlap here with other topics we're going to cover in the future.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Yeah, lots of overlap. So there's plenty more episodes to come on different topics relating to all these pieces. But specific to storage, I think you kind of got the gist of it.
Storage wars.
Well, Karl, it's been fun, man. First episode of For the Record in the books. We've been talking about doing this for a while. I'm glad we actually got to sit down to do it. Why don't you let people know before we get out of here where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter as OSTX78. And yeah, you can find me on Discord as well. Sign up for the Discord SG. Yeah. You'll find me always on the tech channel, always in the main open group.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. If you haven't joined the Season Gaming Discord, definitely check it out. As Karl just said, we have a tech dedicated channel where we're talking about this kind of stuff on a daily basis between Karl. I'm not the expert, but I am in there, and along with several other people who love just chatting about this stuff every day. So come join us. But until then, I was your host, Ainsley Bowden. That was Karl Dwyer. This is For the Record, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Next time.